Hi. So, listen, I think Alex signed us up, my communication specialist, to give testimony. I believe so. I can give the testimony. He had a death in the family this morning, so he is not going to be here. I can give the testimony, except for I'm having issues with my eyes, and so I cannot put I'm not using my camera for Zoom. I'm happy to give it, or I'm happy to submit the written testimony. What do you suggest? Counselor, you're unmuted.
Thank you. Um, as you're doing it right now is perfectly fine.
Oh, okay. Okay.
Okay?
Yep.
Madam Chair, this is Liz. I will be joining you. I'm going to go grab something to eat. I'll be with you very shortly when I'm checked in.
Okay. I got
Talk
you
to you
down.
soon.
Talk to you soon.
And Lydia, before we start, I should just say I'm going to be switching at some point in this to my phone, so I'll disappear and come back. I have to go somewhere.
Okay. Thank you. Councilor Malley, you want to give a start time of 2:05? That's enough time for colleagues to get on and stuff?
I think that sounds perfect, Madam Chair.
Okay.
My first question is, I want to know what Liz is making for lunch.
Or can we have some? Is it?
That's a better question.
Yes. Is she sharing? Just have to make some noise, huh, Eddie?
Yeah, I have a staple remover. So
I'm just like, what's that freaking sound?
yeah. How
Make
could
sure
you tell
all
that?
awake.
How could
I'm
you tell that
watching
was
you do
me?
it on video. I'm watching you.
Oh, you could see me?
Yeah, I can see you.
Oh, because my face is not on the video, so I thought I was off screen. You know?
So we saw click, 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 click.
I can't get one by you, Lydia, huh?
No.
You know how those Eastie girls are, you know?
You know, we stay awoke. We stay. rewatch.
Hi, everyone.
Hello,
Hi.
how are you?
Doing well, thank you. Sorry, we were having some technical
Oh.
difficulties here.
That's the commissioner. Good to see you, Commissioner.
Good to see
Hey,
you.
Kamish, thanks for doing this, and appreciate all the great work you guys have been doing during these incredibly difficult days. So glad to have you. Is Sabino joining us as well?
Yes, he's actually right next to me.
Hi, Sabino. Hi, Commissioner.
He's a little camera shy.
Oh. Well, it should be a good update and answer any final questions we have, updates on what's going on, numbers, things like that. Well, it's 2:05, so if it's okay with the lead sponsor. All right, then. I'm gonna go ahead and start this hearing. Good afternoon, everyone. I'm City Councilor Lydia Edwards, Chair of the Committee on Government Operations. It's Thursday, August 6th, and we're here today for a virtual working session on docket 0643, order for a hearing to explore preparation for the upcoming 2020 elections in September and November. Councilor O'Malley is the sponsor of this docket, and it was referred to the committee on April 15th. The committee held a hearing on this matter on May 15th. In accordance with the Governor Baker's March 12th executive order, modifying certain requirements for open meeting law, we are able to have this hearing and working session on Zoom. The City Council will continue to have their working sessions and public hearings on Zoom due to public health accommodations, but also assuring public access to its deliberations. The public may watch this meeting via live stream at www.boston.gov/city-council-tv. It will also be rebroadcasted at a later date on Comcast 8, RCN 82/Verizon 1964. Written comments may be sent to the committee email at ccc.go@boston.gov. It will be part of the record and available to all councilors. The purpose of this docket is to ensure that the upcoming elections provide safe means for people to vote. At the hearing, the councilors supported options that would increase voter access and participation, including voting by mail and early voting. The committee discussed election procedures and the absentee ballot application process. At our previous hearing, we were joined by Commissioner Tavares, Boston Election Department, from the Boston Election Department, as well as Sino Pamonte, who is the Assistant Registrar of the Election Department. And the committee we also had several colleagues join us, and as well as Cheryl Clyburn, and I'm forgetting one other organization. I apologize in my notes. Also joined us for public testimony and about assuring that we have access. So we're today following up on that hearing. Since that hearing, Governor Baker signed Chapter 115 of the Acts of 2020, an act relative to voting options in response to COVID-19 into law. I'm going to turn it over now to the lead sponsor after I announce my colleagues in order of arrival for Councilor O'Malley to kick off open remarks, and then I will go through the other city councilors. So in order of arrival, we have, and wanted to note that, of course, the lead sponsor, Councilor O'Malley, is here, Councilor Ed Finn, Councilor Kenzie Bach, Councilor Liz Breadon. I believe we've been joined by, or will be joined later on by Councilor Sabi George, who also let me know she's on her way. With that, I'm going to go ahead and turn it over to the lead sponsor, and then anyone else for opening remarks, and then the lead sponsor will take it from there.
Thank you very much, Madam Chair, and good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. Great to be with all of you. Shout out, obviously, to Commissioner Tavares and the incredibly talented men and women of the Boston Elections Department who have been doing yeoman's work in incredibly difficult circumstances. So at the offset, I just want to publicly thank you and your team, Commissioner. And our job is to support you and to make sure that we can deliver the resources that you and your team need. Obviously, the point of this hearing is to answer some questions as things have changed as it relates to voting, as it relates to all the difficulties and the complexities of running an election in a major city. To do that amidst pandemic, to do that on a day where the first of the month, when we may see some college students come in, just further exacerbates some of the safety concerns, and that's what I know we all share. I wanted to also thank my colleagues, and particularly the chair of the Government Operations Committee, Councilor Edwards, for her great partnership and leadership on this. I first called for this hearing in April. We had a hearing then in May. In the month of June, the state legislature went back and forth on a number of different voting reform bills. Ultimately, as the chair said, it was on July 6th, I believe, that Governor Baker signed into law what will now be our process for statewide elections, and obviously mandates every city and town election department to conduct these fair and free and safe elections. So the purpose of this hearing is to just sort of delve down, or this working session rather, is to delve down a little bit deeper into what early voting is going to look like, how the response has been on some of the vote by mail applications, how the process will go for sort of typical absentee voting, as well as, perhaps most importantly, among the issues that we'll discuss today, safety protocols to make sure that on first, when we do have in-person voting for those individuals who wish to take advantage of that, that we're able to build as safe a process as humanly possible. So I have a number of questions, but again, wanted to thank the commissioner, thank Registrar Piemonte for his great work, legendary work. I know we've got Cheryl Crawford and others from Mass Vote, some great partners in this. This will be a positive working session. We're on the same page. We want to make sure that we can have a safe election in September and then in November, which I would argue is the most important election of any of our lifetime by far. We want to make sure that it's done safely, and we want to make sure that we have every precaution, just sort of map out what some challenges may be. So thank you again, Madam Chair. Thank you, my colleagues. Look forward to a great conversation.
My apologies. I wanted to note that it was Cheryl Crawford, not Clyburn, as I mentioned before, who had joined us from Mass Vote. On to Councillor Flynn.
Thank you. Thank you, Councillor Edwards. Thank you, Councillor Edwards and Councillor O'Malley for your leadership on this important issue. As Councillor O'Malley said, this is probably the most important election that we're going to face in our lifetime. But what's important and what I want to focus on is what is the actual procedure to vote for my constituents, especially immigrant residents that don't speak English, that may not be able to read English as well. Specifically, I'm talking about the Chinese community in Chinatown in the South End. I'm also talking about the Spanish community I represent as well, Spanish-speaking community I represent as well in the South End and in South Boston. Many of them live in public housing. I want to specifically know what is the process for obtaining an absentee ballot for someone that doesn't speak English or may not even be able to read English. How do they request a ballot? Where is it sent to? How do they fill it out? Does it need to be notarized? How does it get back into the mail system? Knowing a lot of my constituents, especially the Asian community, they really haven't been outside of their homes in 5 or 6 months since COVID-19. I've been in Chinatown every day for 7 days a week, and the place is deserted. So I want to make sure that my constituents are able to cast their ballot in making sure that their vote is as important as someone that lives up on Beacon Hill or Back Bay, who I also represent, the Back Bay and the Beacon Hill community. But I know they'll be able to vote, but I want to make sure my immigrant constituents are able to vote as well. Again, thank you to the commissioner, thank you to Sabino, and thank you to Cheryl in Mass Vote. I've done a forum with them recently, and they do a tremendous amount of work in our city along with the Chinese Progressive Association. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Flynn. We've also been joined by Councillor Mejia, Councillor Bach.
Thank you, Madam Chair. Just want to thank the Election Commission as well for coming today and Mass Vote. I think this is incredibly important, and what's really important for us to be talking about today, and why I'm glad that you and the lead sponsor have called this working session, is just the, on the ground, what are we doing to be ready for September 1st, and really how we as counselors can help. So some of the things I'm most concerned with are, how are we doing for poll worker recruitment? Do you need us to be pushing that out to more people and new people given the health concerns? What are the latest procedures for our buildings where we've got voting in with elderly housing? Just really clear guidance for folks who are changing addresses on the 1st of September. It's been a real concern of mine all year that the legislature decided to schedule the election on Boston's biggest move-in day. And I think we need to be being really clear to people that they can vote at their address, their address that they're living in right now in August, even if they're changing addresses on September 1st. And just hearing how it's going in terms of I know a huge number of people have sent absentee ballot requests to the election department, and there was increased staff for the department in the budget, but just hearing kind of where we are on all of that and how we as counselors can help, and really seeing this election on September 1st as both super important in its own right. We have a big senatorial race. We've got lots of down ballot races on this, and then also being a dress rehearsal for, as Councillor O'Malley said, an incredibly important national election coming up in November. And I just want to make sure that I and my office are able to be as helpful as possible to making sure the maximum number of people are enfranchised and get their chance to vote. So really appreciate this today. And thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you, Councillor Bach. Councillor Breadon.
Thank you. I really don't have anything to add to what Councillor Bach has just referenced. The move-in day here in Alston, Brighton, a huge number of our population changed address on this date. It's going to be it's always a chaotic day at the best of times. I've heard from constituents about older poll workers. Many of our retirees are actually poll workers, and they've come to me and said that they don't feel safe working as a poll worker. So I'm concerned about adequate recruitment of folks who are able to work as poll workers. And really, I really do think it's a dress rehearsal for November, and it's really important to iron out the kinks of the process so that we can ensure efficient polling, not only in this election, but also in November. So I'm really interested to hear the discussion this afternoon. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Asabi George, then Councillor Mejia.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I just snuck in late to this hearing, so I don't want to repeat anything that my colleagues have said. Just look forward to this hearing. I think it's obviously a very critical issue and something that we need to talk aloud about and make sure that we've got plans in place for safe elections, but also ones that are accessible for all of our residents across our city. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Mejia.
Yes, just want to make sure you can hear me and see me.
You're good to go.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Councillor Edwards and Councillor O'Malley for your leadership, as well as the advocates and the Department of Elections for working incredibly hard to keep everyone engaged in the democratic process during such a chaotic time. We know that voting is a powerful way for our people to amplify and uplift their voices. And with the state of our country right now, this is even more important that we all doing what we can to ensure that people have access to safe ways to vote. I look forward to this hearing and more importantly, making sure that we're removing the barriers to engagement as it relates to language access and technology, particularly for those who have a hard time accessing information. I recognize that this is an unprecedented time and we appreciate everyone's dedication to this. So thank you again for hosting and looking forward to the dialogue.
Thank you very much. I'll just quickly note everything, I second everything my colleagues have said. I also think it's worth noting if we're going to be uplifting, getting people out to vote and making sure that no matter what happens with this pandemic, that they are completely enfranchised, not just at normal rates. We should be pushing to make sure more people are voting. But I also want to again emphasize we also need everybody. Not everyone can vote, but everybody needs to fill out the census. So sorry to co-opt that, but I really need to, and I'll say it towards the end. We need everybody in the city of Boston, especially in the state of Massachusetts, but in the city of Boston to fill out your census. I know East Boston is is running behind its numbers, and we just can't let Southie beat us, and we just can't let Beacon Hill beat us. I'm sorry, and I'm West Roxbury, you're not going to beat us. Like East Boston, we could do these numbers better. I won't bring the at-larges in between the battle, but I'm sorry over Alston Brighton. We just have got to do better, and we can do better. So I'm going to encourage everybody to get rallied up in their district, not only to turn out voters, but also to turn out people for the census as well. So sorry to co-opt that lead sponsor, but I think that the two are equally connected, deeply connected. So I want to make sure that we brought that up as well. I'll turn it back over to you if you'd like to introduce our guest speakers and go ahead and lead on this.
Great. Thank you, Madam Chair. And I concur completely. I actually have a whole list of questions specifically about the census and way that we could use both the election as a way to get more information out to encourage people, just the importance of filling out that form, where as a city we need to do a heck of a lot better. Thank you, Commissioner Tavares and Registrar Piemonte. I think we're going to begin with you. I didn't know if you had any opening statements or just wanted to sort of get right into it.
I just want to first thank you for sponsoring this.
Of course.
It is important, and I'm sure everyone has a ton of questions surrounding safety regarding the upcoming elections. So thank you, and thank you, Councilor Edwards, and all the committee members as well.
Thank you. Thanks, Commish. So I guess I want to sort of do an overview for this round of questions. So after our hearing back in May, we saw a lot of action at the state level. And is it correct that there will be 3 opportunities for a voter to participate in the September 1st primary election? He or she can either vote by mail or request a ballot to be sent to their home, filled out and then mailed in, or they can take advantage of an early vote location in the city, or they can vote on election day. It's correct. Those are the 3 ways.
That is correct. Those are the 3 options for voters. The Secretary of State has done their initial mailing to all registered voters.
Yep.
Via a returnable postcard, which is postage paid. Anyone can request a mail-in ballot. And then early voting is scheduled to start on Saturday, August 22nd. We are now mandated to have a full weekend of voting before the September primary, with 9 sites going on both Saturday and Sunday. We'll have sites out in the community on Tuesday and Thursday, and City Hall will be available for voting Monday through Friday, August 24th through August 28th.
Great. So I want to go sort of piece by piece. So let's start with the vote by mail. Has every registered voter received the application to apply for vote by mail at this point?
Yes, at this point, every registered voter has received an application. For any new registrations, we will mail the application. So with their confirmation of their registration, they'll receive an application with a prepaid return envelope.
And when is the deadline to register to vote for the September 1st primary?
The new deadline for the primary is August 22nd.
Okay, that's positive, because usually there was a larger sort of time differential, so that's good. Of course, I still hope, and I know my colleagues, that one day we'll have same day registration, but we'll save that for another hearing. So it is it both active and inactive voters who receive the application to vote by mail?
Correct. That is
great.
Correct. Deadline for requesting a vote by mail ballot is August 26th.
Okay, and can you how many absent, or how many vote by mail requests have we received back? I'm sorry, Commissioner.
All vote by mail, this includes absentee and vote by mail requests, 42,000.
42,000.
Yeah.
And there are I think 400, so that's about 10% of all registered voters?
That's correct.
And is that, that seems very positive, a positive number, since it's still relatively early and folks still have 2 or 3 weeks to get those back.
That's correct. All ballots have to be back here by September 1st, by the close of polls. So 8 o'clock on election day, they have to be received by the election department.
And I'm sorry, and what was my, I know we're both in City Hall, my connection's a little unstable, so I may have missed this. What's the deadline to submit your request for a ballot, to vote by mail?
The deadline to submit the request for a vote by mail ballot is August 26th. And
Okay,
then the deadline for the ballot to actually be received is September 1st by the close of polls. And voters have multiple options in terms of returning their ballot. There will be a drop box on the 3rd floor here at City Hall. They can drop their ballot there. They can return their ballot to any of the early voting sites as well, or they can return it via mail.
if I requested a vote by mail ballot and I forgot about it, or I didn't realize that I didn't realize that I had it until September 1st, could I fill it out and give it to my voting my typical precinct?
No, it has to be received by the election department.
And if somebody requests a vote by mail and doesn't send it in, can he or she still vote on the 1st?
Yes, they can.
Okay. So if that scenario were to happen where I would have my vote by mail, but I hadn't sent it in by the 1st, I could just go to my voting location and vote there and rip it up or whatever.
In fact, we're getting a lot of questions about that, and we anticipate that there's probably a lot of people who are going to sit around on their ballot and just watch the numbers before they determine
Sure.
which option they're going to utilize.
Yeah, interesting. Okay. So we've received 42,000 back. Do you have the split by I think of my neighbors, an older couple who we helped them get set up, so they filled out a form. So they get mailed absentee ballots every election. That's a service that you offer, particularly for older residents, sort of before pandemic. So they would just be the typical absentee ballot recipients. Do you know what of the 42,000 requests we've received, do you know what the split is between sort of traditional absentee ballot and then this new vote by mail that we were able to work with the state to get these applications sent out to everybody?
There's approximately 6,000 absentee requests. Of that number, approximately 6,000 is the typical absentee voter.
That's great. It's great to me that we've got, if it's 6,000, then 6 times that number represents the individuals who've taken advantage. So at this point, can you or Sabino sort of predict how many, and we won't hold you to an exact number, but could you sort of predict how many vote by mail ballots will be issuing for the primary if we're already at 42,000?
I think that's going to be really hard to say. And again, I think even of the 42,000, we still don't know that these 42,000 will actually cast their ballot by mail.
Fair enough.
A lot of people are just watching the numbers. Some people have concerns with this new mail-in system. The phone calls have varied from people who are upset about the vote by mail option, people who are still waiting on the numbers to see if COVID numbers go down before they decide whether they're going to show up in person. So we don't know for sure what the actual return rate of these ballots are going to look like.
Fair enough. As someone who's, paid attention to these numbers and trends, that to me seems, I agree with everything you said, Commissioner. That seems like a very encouraging number that we're already at 42,000, when I would venture a guess that, again, things may change, but you would probably looking at about 100 to 130, no, probably 100 to 110,000 people voting in this primary, I would guess would be sort of a ballpark figure. So the fact that we're more than a third there already, I think augurs well that we're going to have good participation. So that's good. So that's the first. I'm going to briefly ask about early vote, and then I'm going to get into safety preparations, but I'll let my colleagues go. But just in terms of the early vote sites, there are 9 sites around the city. Have those sites been chosen yet or selected yet?
Those sites have been selected, and we will be sharing it with the council members so that we can hopefully promote what the sites are going to be. There'll be 9 sites. We tried to place one in each of the city council districts on both Saturday and Sunday.
Okay. And how are you doing? I know Councilor Bach had referenced this in her opening remark, but how are you doing staffing clerks and wardens and officers to help sort of facilitate the early vote?
Our numbers are not looking awful, surprisingly.
Okay.
So we do have a high turnover right now, but I think we're doing well for early voting staffing. We try to utilize our more seasoned workers for early voting because it's a little bit more complex, because any registered voter can go to any of the sites, and we have every single ballot style available at the early voting location. So we do use a lot of our repeat and more seasoned poll workers for the early voting sites. Every single site that was selected is either a large gym or a banquet hall, just to allow us to spread out and encourage social distancing among our workers. We're trying to have at least 12 workers staffed per location. We don't want to overcrowd the locations, because we have to take into account the voters are going to be coming in. We're limiting the number of booths that we're going to have at every single one of our sites. All of our election officers are going to be equipped with PPE, so we'll be providing face masks, gloves, hand sanitizer, disinfectant wipes, and face shields. Although they're not required, we will be providing face shields for the election officers as well.
And I assume the answer is yes, face masks will be required for all voters as they enter the facilities?
Face masks will be encouraged for all voters entering the facilities.
But not required?
Not required, because if someone has a medical condition which prevents them from wearing a mask, we can't necessarily ask. We will have additional masks on hand, and we will be promoting the use of masks, and we will offer anyone who doesn't have a mask. But if someone refuses, then we cannot require them to wear a mask. If they have a medical condition, we can't ask them. So we can't distinguish between someone who may have a medical condition versus someone who just doesn't want to wear a mask. So we will be encouraging our election officers to find a secluded area within the polling location and have this voter vote by clipboard, distance away from everybody else, or at a long table where they can be placed at one end, having them vote, and then just disinfecting either the clipboard, the table, and then maybe spraying that section down to disinfect. But we can't turn anyone away because they don't want to wear a mask.
Okay. I've got the bulk of my questions is going to be on some more safety protocols, but I've gone over my time, so I'll go for the next round, but I appreciate that. And I want to return to the mask question, but I have some more specifics, but that's all for this round. Thank you, Commish. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you very much. We've also been joined by Councilor Flaherty. Going to just down in order of arrival, Councilor Flynn.
Thank you, Councilor Edwards. Again, thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, my first question, a lot of the poll workers traditionally have been older residents that have done it for a long period of time. What plans do we have in place that maybe the older people may not want to be poll checkers? Are we doing any outreach to college students or younger people in the city to fill in that role?
Yes. So for anyone, we started our outreach back in March. We did it a little bit early because we did anticipate some of our election officers would not want to return. So we did start our recruitment efforts early. We have about 1,500 people who are already assigned. Those who are not interested have already notified us that they are not going to be coming back. Of the 1,500, there is a lot of turnover. We have 1,000 new applicants, which is very impressive. We have never seen those numbers. Of those applicants, we go through it and we'll weed out anyone who really is not fit for work in the polls, that didn't really know what they were signing up for when they initially filled out the application. We're also working with Suffolk University and Northeastern to recruit students. My plan is to kind of do a test run before November and see how well this goes so that we can actually reach out to other colleges and universities as well.
Thank you, Commissioner. Commissioner, I know you mentioned that you sent an application out to every registered voter to get an absentee ballot. How did you do that to the Chinese community or those that may not be able to read English? Do we specifically send out a letter to them in their own language?
The applications are, the application that was sent out by the Secretary of State was translated in English and Spanish with an option to, if you needed it, an additional language, to check off a box for Chinese or Vietnamese.
But how would they, how would the Secretary of State's office know to send a letter in Chinese to my constituents that don't speak English?
It would have to be requested and sent to the election department, and we would submit it to them. And our applications were translated in Chinese and Vietnamese. So the applications that they received from the election department are translated in both Chinese and Vietnamese.
Okay, but they didn't receive any, they would not receive anything from the Secretary of State's office. The only way they could get something is if they initiated the process.
From the state's mailing, yes, they would have to initiate the process by, there was a translated section that gives on their postcard that gave them the option to check that off and return it to the election department. And then
and then you would send them
a translated version.
How many requests back did you get from the Chinatown community in terms of they're seeking more, they're seeking that application in their own language?
At the moment, I don't know that we have received any, but we can follow up with that.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not blaming anyone, especially you, Commissioner, or your team, because you do an excellent job. But I want to make sure my constituents also are able to vote. And it's troubling to me that, you know, it's difficult for the Chinese community to vote. They have to go through an extra step all the time to participate in democracy. So I don't think they'll send back that piece of paper back to the election department to get asking for you to get it translated, and then you sending it back to them, and then they sending it back to you again. I think that's just too much, too many steps to do. And is there any way that we can make it easier for the Chinese community, or for any, you know, I know the Secretary of State has done it in Spanish and English, but we have a lot more languages spoken in this city.
So I think for this early voting go around, the ballots are also going to be available in Chinese and Vietnamese, which they were not previously available for early voting. So that's another piece of legislation that was updated to address COVID. They added the Chinese and Vietnamese ballots for early voting, as opposed to just election day ballots.
Early voting, but not through the Secretary of State's office application, right?
Not through, for what? It's available, but they have to request it. Yeah. So it is, the application is available in translated application is available, but again, they do have to request the translation.
Yeah, that's my big concern, is because I know them very well. They're older people. They haven't been out of the home in 5 months because of COVID-19. And we're sending them food all the time. And it's even difficult to get food inside their apartment, never mind to get them to come outside of their apartment to begin the process of requesting a ballot. So I'm somewhat discouraged that they're not being really part of the process.
Counselor Flynn, I'm gonna, if it's okay, just what I might suggest is, because we do have some advocates as well to speak from Mass Vote and some community organizations. I think this is you are highlighting a problem with the fact that you cannot request the ballot to request a ballot is in English. And the fact is, in order to even ask for the Chinese version of that, you have to click a box. And that's a problem. But I think just to allow for the other colleagues to ask some questions, I think we should, when we get to Mass Vote, and also to include our colleagues from the election department, we should be thinking as creative as possibly to make sure that those who don't speak English or Spanish can request a ballot, if I may.
Oh, yeah, that makes sense. Thank you, Councilor Edwards. And again, thank you, Commissioner.
Councilor Bach?
Thank you, Madam Chair. And thank you, Commissioner, for being with us today. I wanted to ask about ballot drop-off boxes. Is it true that we only have them at City Hall right now?
Right now, it's only at City Hall and any early voting location.
And an early vote. So if I've got my ballot, if it already came to me and I filled it out, I could stop by one of the early vote locations and drop it off?
Yes, the problem with creating additional drop boxes is going to be, they have to be open and available until the polls close. And how do we manage all of these drop box centers and secure them at 8 o'clock on election day to retrieve all of those ballots? It would be, logistically, it just would be extremely difficult for the election department at this moment. So we thought the best solution right now is to have them at every early voting location, which we have 9 on Saturday and Sunday, and a few sites in the community Tuesday and Thursday, and then the option here at City Hall.
Okay. I mean, I guess I would just say I've definitely been hearing a strong desire for more, partly because, you know, as you know, people have been following certain races. There's the one down in New York where there have been issues with postmarks and such. And so I think because of that, I mean, just to be clear, the U.S. Postal Service is a very reliable, excellent service, great way to cast your ballot. But I have been hearing from people a kind of desire to physically drop it in a drop box. And so I would just, I guess it seems to me like us doing a little bit of contingency planning there would make sense, because, you know, but I'm glad to know that they're going to be, I guess one point then would be that as we're putting together, when are you going to have the materials out about locations for early voting? And
we're aiming for August 14th to have a mailer go out to every single registered voter, but we do have a flyer ready that we can share with all of the council members so that you know exactly where everything will be located.
Well, I think that would be great. I certainly think we all should be publicizing those locations as soon as possible, right? I mean, all of this is, how do you drive safe, secure voting for people who want to before September 1st, right? To make September 1st maximally manageable and safe. And so to me, before you guys have the mailing hit, like if we can have that out, and then I think it's really key that those materials, both the flyer and the mailing, mention to people that there's also going to be a secure ballot drop box at that, at those locations, and sort of flag that, right? Like make that a clear thing. Because I think that will help with some of the folks I know who are looking to deliver it and can't quite believe they have to go all the way down to City Hall.
Yes, and we did put out a press release once this was certified or voted on, so an official, which kind of detailed all of the locations. We went through the vote by mail process, and we will continue to try to utilize other avenues to get as much communication out as possible, including the neighborhood newspapers, especially when we're in a specific location. We'll try to promote that site is open for voting.
Yeah, no, great. And I was just say, treat us as active partners as much as possible. Because we all know, right, that our like normal communication channels are failing right now. We know that because the census is so low, right? So, and that's not on the Election Commission. That's just like all of us realize that because people aren't in their normal patterns, there's like a bunch of ways that we would normally communicate with people that aren't happening. So I just feel like we have to full court press this. So anything we can do to be getting that out. I mean, you know, like if we have flyers, we can drop them in the public housing communities in our neck of the wood. You know, I just think like we really want to be spreading this word. So I appreciate that and would love those materials. And also similarly, I mean, I'm heartened to hear you have such a large number of folks applying for poll workers. But if there isn't, if as we get closer and people get, I mean, again, you see the public health data, and we might have some people who think better of doing it, and then we need to have people ready to replace them. So just again, would love to be kept apprised of if you guys need help recruiting on that front.
Thank you. We definitely.
Thank you.
And can I have one more,
Council.
Madam Chair?
Sure.
Just if you could you talk a little bit just about, Madam Commissioner, about the issue I mentioned about sort of like polling places in elderly residences and whether there's any additional precautions that have been taken on that place. I'm thinking in my district of Moorville House. I'm thinking of Amy Lowell House. I mean, we've got a bunch of them. So just curious kind of how you guys have approached that.
Our goal is never to change a voting location because that always comes with some disruption for the voters. So if the polling location was willing to host us, then we are going to remain there. If we do have a number of locations who were unwilling to host us, and we did have to move outside of those locations. And again, once it's been voted on, we will post it. Actually, by tomorrow, these locations should be posted on our website.
Okay. Okay. Yeah. No. I guess I just was wondering whether there's less that you're necessarily changing them, because I agree. I think we'd actually see a lot of our elders sort of disenfranchised if they didn't have that location in their building. But just thinking about whether there's some changes in how entrances are handled and everything vis-a-vis those buildings.
If I may, I do believe Councillor O'Malley was going to go through cleaning, PPE, and safety in the next round.
Fantastic.
Can we do that? Okay.
Yeah, sounds good. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Breadon.
I really, one of my concerns was the elder housing, because so many of our polling places are in elder housing. I will wait for further clarification on the protocols for that going forward. The other question I had was more if the issue of people changing address, if they move on September 1st, what's the protocol for being able to vote? Is my understanding correct that they can vote from their old address on September 1st?
That's correct. Voter registration deadline would have passed, so they would have to go to their old polling location.
Okay. Okay, that's fine. Thank you. That's all I have for now.
Thank you. Councillor Sabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair. And I was in a little bit of a panic for a minute there and realized I had a pile of mail that hadn't yet been sorted. So my applications did arrive. I was in a panic that they didn't arrive. But I am curious. So anyone that has, first, thank you everyone who is here and appreciate your time this afternoon to talk about this issue. I have anyone that has submitted this application for either the September or the November election, is there a way for them to confirm that it's been received?
There is, it can be tracked through the Secretary of State's website. So once we've received it and we've scanned it into the system, they will be able to log on to the Secretary's site and see that it has been received.
Okay, and so a voter could go on and track it. That's great.
That's great. I can send you the exact link. I'll send a follow-up with the link direct. Yeah, it's like track it at ma.us or something.
That's great. If you would send that, we can share that in our channels. That would be fantastic. And then on the polling location questions that Councilor Bach was asking about, are there any sites that you know of offhand that are okay with the preliminary primary date of September 1st and not okay with the November date? Because as much trouble as it is to move a location, it's better to move them for both dates, not one, because that creates extra confusion.
No, all of our license agreements is a commitment for both dates.
Okay, and with our schools as well, because school will not be in session any which way September 1st, but it might be in session in some fashion November 3rd?
It will not be in session on November 3rd. We did get a commitment and confirmation that that was a request that we put to BPS, was to not have in-person classes on November 3rd. So school will not be in session on the 3rd of November.
Okay, all right. That's good to know. I must have missed that notification. Colleagues realize that there will be no school on November 3rd? Yeah, so, okay, so, and this isn't on, this is, I think, on all of us to make sure that information is widely shared. So I will confirm that with the school district. That
Thank you,
there will not be-
Commissioner.
that there will not be in-person school on November 3rd. I'm not opposed to that idea. Many suburban communities do that, where schools are used as polling locations. But I think that that's an important thing for us to be aware of as we prepare for Election Day. So I'll take that charge and check that out and understand those rules going forward. Thank you very much. That is it for me, at least for this round. I'll see if I've got additional questions. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, Commissioner.
You're welcome.
Thank you very much, Councillor Mejia.
Okay, can you see me and hear me?
Yes, and yes.
And thank you, Madam Chair, and everyone. I feel like I'm learning everything in this situation. I did not know that there would be no school on November 3rd, so I need to plan accordingly for that update. Thank you, Sabi George, for getting to the bottom of that one. So my questions are just kind of more around access and communication. I'm just curious if you could talk to me a little bit about some of the work that has been done to engage and activate younger voters to help out in the polls. I know that there's been a lot of concern around our elders. So just curious about what, if any, support you need from us to help share information around getting younger poll workers.
Again, we have been working with the two colleges. We want to see how well that works. And the Secretary of State has added this to their website as well. We have done some social media outreach to recruit additional poll workers, and we are seeing a lot of new younger applicants. As I previously mentioned, we have 1,000 new applicants in our pool. So I think we're looking okay for now.
That's good. That's good to know. And I'm just curious too, in terms of engaging, I always talk a lot. I mean, I understand and I appreciate translation and interpretation as really a way to break down barriers to accessibility. But I always want to bring into the space that there are a lot of folks who are illiterate and who don't know how to read or write, even in their native language. So I'm just curious about what are some of the outreach strategies and tactics that you're using to kind of get that word out into other types of learners, if you will?
Well, we haven't really done much work around that outreach. I think we try our very best to translate everything into multiple languages. That is really, I'll be honest, not an area where we've touched very much. I think we're always so focused on the language piece, but we're not necessarily factoring in anyone who may be illiterate. Usually we see people who have a difficulty reading show up in person on Election Day, and that's usually the option that they utilize the most. And when we are training our election officers, we do tell them to keep that in mind. We usually have people point. We may put something on our clipboard or something and have someone point to what it is they want, but there's a lot more work that can probably be done there.
Thank you for that, Commissioner. I did receive my ballot by mail, and like many others, I thought I was set. I think that we could do a little bit of more of a communication and outreach to help people understand that it's a two-part process, that once you get it, you have to apply for it in order for you to actually get your ballot. So I just think that we could use a little bit more communication out in the streets around the process of it. That would be really helpful to some of the constituents that I know have called me and asking me, I'm all set, I got this. I'm like, no, you got to open it up. You got to actually do something with it. So I just think that that communication could be really helpful to a lot of folks. And then I also am curious, I've gotten some questions from folks that, what if they do send it in and then they decide to show up at the polls? Will they still be able to vote even though they sent in their mail ballot? I don't know if that.
So if they haven't mailed it, they can still show up in person, but if they've already mailed it, then that's their only option.
Their only option, okay. And then in terms of, like, let's say, for instance, you've moved during when your mail-in ballot got mailed to you, is there other ways that you can actually request it, like maybe at local bodegas or libraries or places where even barbershops and hair salons and non-traditional spaces where people can actually have access to these mail-in ballot requests?
We are willing to make them available in as many avenues as possible. I know the libraries aren't really, COVID is making everything difficult in terms of where we make things available, but the applications are available on the website as well and downloadable. I know everybody doesn't have access to technology, but that is one method. But if someone wants it mailed, we can mail it to them at their new address. They don't necessarily have to send back the postcard. They can actually request, so any form of a written communication is a request. So it doesn't have to be the actual application. Someone can simply write us a letter stating that they'd like to receive a ballot and let us know where they want it mailed to and include their signature. And as long as there's a signature of the voter on the form, we will mail them the ballot. So it doesn't have to be the actual application.
Thank you for that. And then there's been a lot of confusion, recently on the federal level about this election being postponed. Just last week, there was a lot of buzz around that. So I'm just wondering, how are we as an elections department kind of counteracting that and just making sure that we debunk that situation?
Well, I hope the ongoing communication about the election and them receiving, postcard for early voting and everything in the mail kind of lets people know that this election is still on and going.
Yeah, I feel like every day we get confused by everything that's happening. And then my last, just wanted to just thank you and your whole entire department for all the work that you do. As someone who won by one vote, I really do appreciate this conversation and all the advocates who are pushing for creating space for people to have multiple venues and avenues to be able to voice their concerns through their voting. So thank you for everything that you're doing. Really do appreciate it.
Thank you.
Councilor Flaherty.
Good afternoon, Madam Chair.
Good afternoon.
Obviously, I appreciate, I want to thank my colleague, Councilor O'Malley, for filing, and obviously for you for hosting today's working session. I guess pretty straightforward. We've seen a number of debacles around the country as other states and municipalities have attempted to hold their elections, especially we had to witness the caucuses that occurred in some states that were disastrous. But so as we, Boston and as a Commonwealth, we continue to step up our mail-in voting efforts. I want to make sure that, despite the COVID making many different, creating challenges and making many different changes to almost every aspect of our life, that does not stop us in any way from exercising our right to vote. And I did hear the commissioner. I appreciate the commissioner's efforts to oversee and to run elections here for our city. You had mentioned that there would probably not be any change of location. So my only concern was if has any consideration been given to switching voting locations from traditional sites that are smaller and less conducive to social distancing. That's one question. The other question is in light of what we've seen most recently, I believe it was in New York, where 20% of the mail-in ballots were invalidated due to discrepancies over the postmark date and/or a lack of a postmark, is I guess another question. And three, just given some of those concerns, my expectation will be that a lot of folks in Boston will probably, particularly this September, November, will probably, revert to sort of their sort of old school traditional way of voting, which was to participate in person. So I just want to make sure that we're going to be adequately staffed with poll workers. We've seen some other states where they've been having a difficult time getting poll workers. So it was pleasant to hear that that has not been a problem for Boston. So those are sort of the areas that I'd just like addressed if you wouldn't mind. Thank you.
Thank you. So in terms of the polling location, there are a number of locations that are going to be changing because they have COVID related concerns and they don't want to host, or the location is actually under construction, and we try to find larger locations. Another reason we requested that BPS cancel school on November 3rd was that it would just give us more options in terms of where we could go if we were in need of polling locations. Off the top of my head, I know that we moved 4 precincts into the Matthews Arena, which is a very large space. So we're always keeping that in mind if we are going to move a polling location. And I think we only move it when we absolutely have to, just to try not to confuse voters about where they should be going between elections. And with respect to the postmark date for the early voting ballots or the requests by mail, those ballots have to be received by election day. So regardless if they are postmarked on the 1st and they are received after those, you're right, that ballot will be invalid. But for November 3rd, that ballot has to be postmarked by November 3rd and arrive to us by November 6th.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. As a citywide council, do you have a list of those polling locations across the city so that we can get them out through our platforms and social media, given that the election is less than 1 month away? If there's a polling location change, then clearly it's imperative that our residents and registered voters get that information as quickly as possible. If it hasn't been mailed already, then I would, at the very least, I would like to get a list of those locations, and particularly where the new locations will be, where the voting will be taking place.
We will absolutely be sharing that list. We are just in the process of finalizing a handful of our polling locations today so that we can actually post the changes by tomorrow, and you will all receive a list of those locations, and every single registered voter that will be affected will also receive a mailing notifying them of the change.
Very good. Thank you, Commissioner. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Just a brief note, and then we'll go into the second round. One, I do think it's worth following up, and I think that as chair and as lead sponsor, O'Malley, we should certainly follow up on Councilor Sabi-George's inquiry about the November 3rd being on or off, and know that relatively soon. I support it being off. I just think I don't support that we didn't know that. So we should find that out, confirm it, and make sure that's very clear. Also,
Chair, if I could just interrupt you very quickly. I looked at the BPS calendar that is shared with parents and school communities. It is not listed as a day off. It's listed as a regular day of school. Sorry for the interruption.
Not at all, Commissioner. Maybe we should just, all get together and make sure we're clear about the communication and what happened. In terms of, again, also on Councilor Sabi-George's excellent questioning, the tracking of the application, I didn't know that was even a possibility. I don't know if you could work with central staff that we could have that kind of posted in our chat on the Zoom, the website for that, or get that out to us as soon as possible. I would love to track it. And I think Councilor Flynn, along with your questioning specifically about folks from Chinatown in your area, you might be able to check and see, or encourage them to see if their applications were received. If they weren't, that might also be helpful. I wanted to also just ask the city, and I have one question for the city and one question for Mass Vote. For the city, is there any way when you do put out the information about the polling locations that you could put out information about the census? Since you're putting it out there, I'm just wondering if it's just, don't forget to fill out the census with the neutral thing on there. You're not doing anything else. I understand maybe coming with the ballot, it might come as political, but just on telling people where to vote. that might also be something that I'm hoping. So that's just a question to you. And then while you're pondering that question to mass vote, what Councillor Flynn was discussing is concerning to me. And as a community organization that is about the enfranchise and expanding that, this is to Ms. Crawford. Can we think of some ideas to help folks who do not speak English or Spanish make sure that they have a true opportunity to apply for a ballot if it's in English? So I can go to the city while Ms. Crawford is thinking of some things, but to the city.
Do we have additional flyers from the census left over?
Oh.
Yeah, I know the federal census ones. Remember, we included Sebastian's. I'm sorry.
No, it's okay.
We can definitely come up with a way. We may, if we have flyers. I know that we did piggyback the federal census onto our census mailing in January. We can maybe try and do that again for all of the registered voters that we're reaching out to. For the early voting sites, we will be doing a mailing, but it will be a little difficult because it's kind of
it's not citywide, right? It's only for where the sites are.
We are sending a mailer to every registered voter, but it comes in kind of a postcard format, so that would be a little bit difficult. But for anyone else we're reaching out to for the changes, we can try and slip an additional notification in there.
Thank you. I didn't know if Cheryl was available.
Yeah, I'm here. I'm sorry. I apologize.
No, please.
My camera off. As I mentioned at the onset, I'm having a lot of challenges with my eyes these days. But anyway, I wanted to piggyback on what Commissioner Tavares was saying regarding, or even thanking you, Councilor Edwards, for lifting it up, because I find it really difficult to talk about anything these days right now without talking about the census as well. Because we understand on the other side of COVID that we do need the resources that the census will bring, and that also the census is also, we're talking about representation. So it's one thing leading into the other. A lot of the materials that we have created at Mass Vote, that's talking about the vote by mail bill, the new system that's going to be in place this fall. On the backside of our literature, we also have information asking people, have they completed their census and how to do so, as well as one other piece is voter registration. Are you registered to vote where you currently live? Because we understand that as we are mailing the Secretary of State mailed applications to people where they were registered to vote. And as I'm walking and communicating with people, they're saying they haven't received their applications. I ask them why. Are you registered where you currently are staying? And it's like, no. So that's telling me that there's a big issue, because that also speaks to what's happening with our incarcerated citizens, right? Like those that have misdemeanors or are awaiting trial, who probably are registered at home versus in the institution wherever they're being held. So there's a lot of questions around that. But also, that was one of the, Councilor Edwards, what you lifted up about the language access. That's one of the things we really do see as one of the challenges, is ensuring that our elections take place in the most equitable manner possible. And unfortunately, fortunately, the state has mandated that Boston's election materials be provided in Spanish, Chinese, and Vietnamese. Yet the city must also have adequate numbers of translators presented on election day and during the early voting period. I think we really need to be aware of how to have folk available in person in these areas where we know we're going to have challenges with the language access. That's just one of the ideas that we thought of. And also how, how do we provide translators in languages not covered under the legislation, like Haitian Creole and Cape Verde, because a lot of the communities that we serve, and Khmer, a lot of the communities that we serve have special needs and will need translators at the polling location. I know COVID has just thrown this whole thing all in a tizzy, and I appreciate all of the work Commissioner Tavares, you and your team have been doing. You know, we've had many meetings and discussions around this, and I see that you're implementing a lot of the, you know, things that a lot of the things that we talked about in these meetings, and I'm happy and appreciative of that. But we're steadily thinking about how to increase poll workers, utilizing high school students, utilizing college students, use just a younger swath of folk, because we understand when we think about a lot of people just drop out 24 hours before the election, right? Like, and so we want to make sure that we have tons and tons of people that are available. It makes me so incredibly nervous to think about, look at these other elections that have taken place in Georgia and Nevada and New York as a result of, you know, folk chickening out at the last minute, no fault of their own. We have no idea where COVID is going. And we have no idea in the next 3 weeks. And so we're just asking that we're as prepared as possible. But there's many questions. I almost want to scrap my testimony and ask all these questions. I know listening to the counselors give their own insight about what they see as some of the challenges. There are many. I have like 5 different things listed here that, you know, I'm concerned about and that people keep asking us about. And one of them is the senior facilities, right? Like we already know. I mean, we can't even get into them right now, right? Like, aren't we being barred from going inside senior facilities? So I'm not sure how that works. And maybe that is what you're speaking to, Commissioner Tavares, where many of them will be not consolidated, but actually moved because we can't get inside the buildings. We tried to deliver food to many of these facilities and have no access to the buildings. But a question I had while I have the mic, if you don't mind, Counselor Edward, is that I just want to be clear. You can fill out your ballot at home, but the only way it has to be in a drop box or at City Hall. You cannot drop it on election day at a polling location. Is that correct?
That is absolutely correct, Cheryl.
Okay. 2 more quick little things that I would like for you to think about or tell me where you are with it. And that is provisions being made for our site challenged citizens, as well as, oh, this is a good one. Someone asked me, how do you confirm if someone mailed in their ballot to City Hall, how does the poll worker on election day confirm that this person has not voted already? Does that make sense?
If someone mails their ballot back, then they will not be able to show up in person on election day. They will be pre-marked in the voting list as voted already.
That's what I want to hear.
If someone requests their ballot and does not return it, we do train all of our election officers. They're required to attend a 2-hour training prior to serving. They are instructed to call us because there will be a marking on the voting list indicating that they did request a ballot. They have to have it cleared by us before that individual can vote.
I see. Okay, I'll stop there for a moment since I wasn't invited to speak anyway. But thank you, I appreciate it.
So we're going to go ahead and start the second round. Councillor O'Malley.
Thank you, Madam Chair.
And this round, we're probably going to keep folks to about 3 minutes so we can clean up any other questions or whatnot. I do see that we might have some public testimony and questions as well. So I wanted to make sure we had time for them.
Great. Thank you. And thank you, Cheryl, for those great questions. I know you've been doing this incredible work for so long, and we all owe you a huge debt of gratitude. It's always great to hear from you, and thank you for your great continued advocacy. So, Commish, I just, in between the last questions, I know you can't compare 2 elections. Every election's different, but the last presidential year state primary, September 8th, I think it was, of 2016, the total Voter turnout in Boston was 34,424 voters, just under 10% of all registered voters participating. So the fact that we're at 42,000 requests already, I think demonstrates how successful this will be, this vote by mail, and make it finally Massachusetts to have no excuse absentee ballot, which we did not have before last month. And also, I think it underscores what we want, and that's to encourage as many voters as possible to vote by mail so that it is less of a risk for those who have to vote in person, either early voting or on election day. So for my limited 2.5 minutes now on this round, I want to talk specifically about safety precautions for election day. So so many of our voting locations are our school gymnasiums, our school cafeterias, our larger spaces that can accommodate more. But are we going to have, we all know this stuff that, you know, there's at most multiple voting precincts. I'm thinking of Holy Name, the biggest probably in the city, if not the state. Every election day at 7 a.m., well, at 6:50, there's probably a line of 20 to 30 people lined up trying to be the first, vote early on their way out. Are we going to limit the number of individuals in a polling location?
Yes, we will be limiting the number of individuals inside of a polling location. We will be spreading our booths. We're required to have them 36 inches apart to allow for any wheelchair user. This time they'll be 6 feet apart where we can spread them out that far, and then they will be limited to 2 voters per booth. We have a 4-station booth. 2 of those booths will be blocked off, and they'll be using opposite ends of the voting booths. And
so will we need an extra either warden or police officer on detail at the front door of all these polling locations to sort of make sure that the crowds don't exceed?
Yes, we will have an election officer that's going to be assigned to the check-in. That election officer is going to be responsible for ensuring that social distancing can be maintained. We'll be placing markings on the floor just to cue voters as to where they should stand. They'll be offering masks for anyone who may not have one, and dispensing hand sanitizer prior to any voter entering the polling location.
And will individuals be able to use their own pens to fill out the ballot, or will they have to use the felt tip markers?
We are encouraging the felt tip markers so that we don't cause any damage to our image cast tabulator. However, the marking pen will not be left at the voting booth as they were in the past. They'll be handed to the voter with the ballot, and then they'll be instructed to deposit that pen at the checkout table, where another poll worker will be responsible for disinfecting the pens before we distribute them.
Oh, so every voter will, as they are handed their ballot, they'll be handed a pen, a felt tip pen that has been disinfected each use.
Correct.
Right. That's great. And will there be plexiglass dividers between the wardens and the clerks and the voters?
At the moment, no. We are providing face shields as a protective barrier between the voter and the election workers. We're also going to have tape marking where the voter should stand in front of the check-in table as well, so they're not standing too close to our election officers.
Great.
We're at about time.
Okay, just a quick last one. I promise it'll be last.
Okay.
Are we going to, I think most campaigns would probably do this on their own, but let's be honest, and I'm guilty. I think we are all guilty, all of us who are serving in elective office now, of flaunting some of the rules in terms of congregating outside a voting location before.
Yeah.
Are we going to actually crack down on that this year to prevent people from sort of clustering around the doors and everything?
We are informing our election officers to go in and make sure that people they're supposed to be 150 feet from the entrance to the polling location. And especially if there's lines forming outside with voters, you don't want anyone too close to anyone who may be standing in line.
Okay, that's it for now. Thank you. Thank you, Commissioner. Thanks, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn? Any additional questions?
Yeah, thank you, Council Edwards. Just as a follow-up to Council O'Malley's line of questioning, when the absentee ballots that will be counted, they're counted at the end of the night, after the polls close. Do we have enough staff, city election staff, or poll workers, I should say, that are able to open up those ballots and count them accurately and make sure we have an accurate count?
The absentee ballots are processed during the course of the day. So we instruct them if there's a lull, they should be processing those ballots because those ballots still have to be checked in on our check-in list. We are going to be sending all of the vote by mail ballots back to the precinct. So we will be looking at the numbers and how many have been, or for precincts that have larger vote by mail ballots, we will assemble additional teams to help the poll workers with just counting. So it could be just teams of people who will just go from precinct to precinct to help process the early voting ballots.
And no, that's good information. Thank you, Commissioner. And Commissioner, for the poll workers, I know it can be a stressful job for them, and it can be a tough day. But do we have an opportunity for the poll workers to, do we have enough coverage so that they are able to take a break? They're able to go outside and get some fresh air and come back inside without interrupting the process of voting. I know that was always a concern from the poll workers, that they just wanted a few minutes to take off, and especially when it's a difficult, stressful environment.
We are required to have 6 election officers per precinct. This may include 2 additional people to count the ballots, to open and process the ballots that are sent to the precincts. But we also have to keep in mind that there is a capacity limit inside of the polling location. And the more people we put there, then the more we're subjecting everyone and voters. So we want to make sure that social distancing can be maintained within our polling location. So we don't want to overstaff. We do staff up just in case someone does call out sick, or we have to move someone from one location to another so that we have coverage. We do factor all of those things.
Okay, my final question is, I also represent a large number of residents in public housing. Just the application process, the paperwork process going back and forth, the mailing system, I should say, with a lot of the buildings being locked at times, a lot of the mail sometimes just placed at the bottom of the stairs in public housing developments or in the mailbox area. Are we making any provisions that for public housing residents, it might be a little more difficult for them to actually receive mail from the city of Boston?
No, we really haven't. We usually do outreach to some of the housing facilities where we may have a large number of typically get a large number of absentee requests, so that we can go out there and help give them training on how to fill out these requests. Again, with COVID, everything's been a challenge. I think just maybe getting the word out there, as many people as we have, putting out communication that people can simply send us a request in writing. They don't have to wait for this application. If you feel like you need a ballot, you have COVID related concerns, you don't want to show up in person, just simply send us something in writing and we will send you a ballot.
Thank you, Commissioner.
Thank you very much. We're going to go to Councillor Breadon.
Thank you. I'm really impressed with the thought that has gone into, sanitizing pens and the flow within a polling place. I think maybe in November, one of my big concerns is that in November we will have very long lines waiting for to get in to vote, and like I remember in the 2008 election, at the end of the day on polling day, we had a line a quarter of a mile long outside the Jackson Man in Alston, waiting to get in and vote like an hour before the polls closed. So I am if it's a quarter mile long under normal circumstances, I'm wondering in terms of social distancing, etc. Do we have protocols in place to ensure that the lines are kept socially distanced and that they can be advanced quickly and safely through the polling station? Thank you.
Hopefully with the new option to vote by mail, we won't have any of those issues. But the election officers are trained and well, actually training actually started today. They are being instructed to make sure that social distancing can be maintained. So we will do the first few markings on the floor to cue voters as to where they should stand. And then they will go out. If there is a long line, then they will be instructed to go outside and just make sure that voters are distancing. And if for some reason they're not getting cooperation, there is a police officer on site. We try to minimize what the officer does, but they are there to support the warden, who's the chief election officer there.
Thank you. That's all I have for now, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bach, sorry, I skipped you. Councillor Bach. This isn't, I can neither see you or hear you very well, Councillor Bach.
Can you hear me now, Madam Chair?
Much better.
Now it's better?
Yes.
Okay, great. Okay, I'll try to be brief since I've got a poor connection now. I just wanted to ask if the city has done any partnership with the places that traditionally receive mail-in ballots for some of our homeless citizens. I ask that because in my district, I've got, for instance, the Women's Lunch Place, 67 Newbury Street. We've got 60 people registered there, and they've been shut. And I'm just wondering whether we've done any outreach with the folks who are sort of the institutional mail recipients for our unhoused folks and thought about how to get applications out to them.
We have not, but if you would like to send me a list of those locations, we can try and reach out to them and put some additional applications in the mail.
Yeah, I would love to do that, and maybe I'll also talk with Linda Downey at Pine Street, because I just think we made such an effort to get people more safely housed that we probably have a bunch of alternative addresses for people right now, and it would be good to think proactively on that front. And then my other question is just the note you made about how we're going to have poll workers calling the elections department if there's anybody who shows up to vote in person and is ticked off as having requested a mail-in ballot. I'm just concerned, have we thought about really providing adequate support for that phone line? Because I would think that because of the sheer number of requests this year, there's a possibility that you have a much higher incidence of that than you've ever had before. And I would hate a situation where we've got lots of voters waiting and backing up because there's not enough people on the election department hotline for that purpose.
I think for September, we may be okay with the phones. We have to think creatively for about November, because we do usually bring in a ton of volunteers and we already have additional people here in the office. So we would have to figure out a creative way to make sure that everybody can be social distanced and still answer all the phone lines.
Yeah, there's certainly lots of virtual sort of distributed phone bank options, but I would just say we would really want to think about that as a rate limiting factor this year. But yeah, those were those. And then just, I guess my last point would just be to say again, that if there's a way for the department to think about more ballot drop boxes, I mean, since obviously we're doing them at early vote locations, it means those ones we're not having be available till 8 p.m. on election day. So the question of, it just seems to me like we could have some sites out in the neighborhoods that we then didn't keep, available. right up until 8 p.m. on election day. And I just feel like, again, just thinking about creative ways to get as many of these ballots in at the 11th hour as possible without people having to show up and vote in person. Thanks so much, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Sabi George.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I appreciate Councillor Bach's questions around our unsheltered or unhoused residents here in the city, and just add the city's shelters to that. So Woods Mullen, as well as Southampton Street to that list. And I wonder, because there are sort of intersecting roles with the city's election department as well as the state's, the Secretary of State's office, if we could perhaps have sort of a clearly defined list of who's responsible for what's going where, sort of a one-page fact sheet that we could share with our networks widely, to just share this information more widely, and I think get that information into the hands of more people would be helpful. But that's it for me. Thank you.
Oh, thank you, Councillor. Councillor Mejia.
Hi, yes, I'm just curious. I'm going back to Councillor O'Malley's question in regards to masks. And I'm just wondering, what I worry about is that people hear that wearing a mask is not required, and some folks may be kind of put off by that. So I'm just curious from a messaging standpoint, how are we communicating that to folks so that they're not worried about showing up to the polls?
But we are going to be promoting the use of masks. That's the position that we're taking. We're encouraging everyone to wear a mask inside of the polling location, and anyone who does not have a mask will be offered a mask upon arrival. It's just that little gray area when you have to make accommodations for someone if they have a health issue that prevents them from wearing a mask. But everyone is going to be required, if they're working, they're going to be required to wear a mask during the course of the election, and every voter should be wearing a mask when they show up to vote.
And I'm just curious in terms of the training for the polling staff and wardens. Do you do those in multiple languages? I think about like Jamaica Plain and other parts of the city that have a high concentration of non-English speakers. Do you do the training in multiple languages?
The training is not available in multiple languages. We staff our polls with interpreters, Haitian Creole, Cape Verdean Creole, Chinese, Vietnamese, Spanish, Russian. We try to identify the areas in the city that need language assistance, and we do recruit people accordingly, but they have to be able to speak both English and that particular language to better serve the residents. Our trainings are done throughout the city, so we try to do a training in every single neighborhood. And this time around with COVID, we're urging all of our election officers to take a virtual training, but we are keeping the in-person training as an option for those who may not have access to technology.
Excellent. And then I'm just curious about, we're talking about the number of people who may show up to the polls, and expecting potentially long lines, and hopefully not, because we have this mail-in option. But I'm just curious in terms of what it looks like. Are we going to do 6 feet apart? How many people can stand in the line? How are you navigating that? What are you determining?
It is going to be 6 feet apart. So everyone's going to be required to stay at least 6 feet apart. If it's a smaller polling location, the line is going to have to form outside of the polling location, unfortunately. And then the voters will have to be queued in once one voter exits and all of the stations have been disinfected, then they'll queue the next voter in.
And I'm just thinking of like safety in terms of like, I'm going to assume that all of this will be happening on the sidewalk, right? Just because,
if it's a small location, then the lines would have to form on the sidewalk.
And then,
Councillor, we're at about time. So if this is like your last question, then
That's it. Thank you so much.
okay. If you had another one, I just was saying where
Oh,
you
no,
can
no,
ask that. Okay.
no worries.
Okay.
I don't want to hold
Thank
you.
you, Counselor. Counselor Flaherty. He may have, Counselor? He may be gone. He may have gone. And then, so I just want to echo before we go to public testimony. Thank you so much for your partnership. Thank you so much for the work that you've done and answering so many questions that I've had personally at my office. This is for the commissioner and for Sabino. I think he must think I have his number on speed dial. I want to thank you both though for the work that you've done. I do think it would be great if you, if we could partner and each of us send a list of locations where we think are hard to reach people congregate. I have a soup kitchen in East Boston. I also have some of the food sites where they give out food, where applications might also be an opportunity to give out. I'm happy to partner with you either to send a location or to pick up a whole bunch of applications and drop them off myself, whatever you think is most important. I think churches, I don't know if that's legal or not, but I'm just thinking about where people are. There we had great success in partnership under the Resiliency Fund with a lot of local nonprofits that do a lot of service work. And so maybe also following that as well with some of the applications. I'm not sure. These are just suggestions, but I'm hoping we can form a partnership. I'd love to grab as many applications to make sure as many people have access to them. I echo Councillor Flynn's concerns when I was knocking on the doors and housing and developments. The mailboxes are in some buildings were just, it was not ideal. It was embarrassing sometimes to see how things are stuffed and they're on the floor and so on and so forth. And so for something so precious, I work with, happy to work with you and for the BHA at some of their offices that are on site and to get more applications there as well. So that's my only suggestions.
Absolutely. We definitely can partner up and do something like that. I think the more people who vote by mail, it just makes it easier for everybody else. To keep voters safe, the residents who may live at a facility, a housing facility that hosts us. So absolutely.
And I just want to make sure to a question to the lead sponsor, Councilor O'Malley, the numbers you stated at the very beginning, I wasn't sure if I got them correct. You said for absentee ballots, there was only 35,000 people who voted before. I'm sorry. Could you do the numbers again? You had compared how many people have voted in early voting or in the primary with the current amount of people who, yes.
Correct. So there's a great resource for those who may be interested on boston.gov/elections, which shows the breakdown of all turnout in the last probably nearly 20 years of elections, maybe 15 years. So I looked back to the last analogous primary, which would have been the September primary of 2016, an election year, obviously not the presidential preference. We may have one or two slightly more high interest races this year, but the total votes cast, absentee, there wasn't early voting for the primary then, but absentee and election day votes for September 7th or 8th of 2016, total number cast was 34,424. The fact that today, on August 6th, we are at 42,000 requests for absentee and other vote by mail. Admittedly, some of those may not be pushed back, but we also still have 20 days to, residents have 20 days to request ballots. I think shows that we will have a very, very high turnout. And what I am hopeful is that we will have a very, very high, vast majority of those ballots that will be cast by mail to show that this system works, as we've seen in countless other states across the country. So it's a credit to the commissioner and her team, but it augurs well for all of us who love democracy to already see such great interaction happening at this early stage.
Thank you. Thank you again. It also, I think, is a touch that we needed, a personal touch reminding people about the election, which I think is only going to help feed and build up the momentum for it. So they got a touch from the city of Boston and or from the Secretary of State, but the ballot will be coming from you guys. So thank you. For now, I'm going to turn it over to public testimony. If we have any folks signed up or who are not, who would like to testify. Not sure if we have anyone signed up. Christine, if folks were interested. Tegan, are you with Mass Vote?
She's muted, but she is. That's our deputy.
Okay. Oh, that's it. Yeah, that's what I thought. Okay. Wanted to make sure. And then I don't know that there's a couple
I know
participants.
you had testimony that Alex asked me to. I can submit it in written form if that's what you like.
No, feel free. We have a little bit, if you want to go ahead and I think you had some points that you were going to make about it.
Yeah, and I'll just lift up a couple that I snuck some in earlier, but just go ahead with this. First off, I do want to thank you, Chairman Edwards and lead sponsor, Councilor O'Malley, for holding this hearing today, as well as the rest of the council for offering your own insights. This is a hugely important issue that cannot receive enough attention. And as you've already heard today, Massachusetts is implementing various far-reaching reforms ahead of our fall election. And this would include that vote by mail system, expanded early voting, and protections for voting on election day. We've heard a lot of this lifted up already, but with all of the rhetoric, I am really nervous because with all the rhetoric that's flying around nationally, right? Like that's filtering into our city, people are terrified around this vote by mail system, voting by mail. Will your ballot get there? Will it count? Will it be in the hallway? As someone, as Councilor Edwards mentioned, when they went around to the different facilities and buildings, right? Like people are just nervous. And so what I think, I hope we're giving the right message that you can apply, send an application in for your for your vote by mail ballot, but you can turn it in person. But the point that I want to stick to is that you cannot turn it in on election day. I'm getting the sense that people think that they can hold the ballot and fill it out, and then instead of standing in line on election day, just turn it in. And I guess we need to be really clear with the messaging around that so that people are not confused. The other piece that I thought people would get, there was some I heard, is that the ballot has to be at City Hall. When you say received by us, you don't mean received at a polling location. You actually mean received by the city or town hall, wherever they live. And so I just think that we need to really be clear on the messaging around that. And so rather than focusing on all the wonderful merits of this policy, we wanted to just make sure that we lifted up some of the challenges. And one of those challenges that we expect this fall, we're really nervous about, is the burden that this system places on local election officials. Because we know that the typical election is 3 to 5% of voters vote by mail, but because of COVID-19 has made our elections anything but typical. Instead, we're seeing vote by mail rates 10 to 20 times this rate. For example, the city of Holyoke, which held a special state Senate race this past May, 50% of the voters voted by mail. In Boston, we expect a minimum of 50% of voters to apply to vote by mail, though we would not be surprised if that rate really reached 75%, as it has in some states. So we're really thinking that we are going to get a much bigger ask around that. But we also know that if action is not taken, and that not everyone that requests a ballot to vote by mail will receive one. That is one of our concerns. We are asking officials that typically train to run a 5K to get ready to run this marathon, because that is exactly what it's going to take to ensure that our elections are safely administered. I'm just skipping through a bunch of some of the stuff because we have already talked about it, but we know that you're very much aware of the shortage in staffing at the polling locations. And I won't beat that one again because I know everybody is working diligently to recruit as many poll workers, younger poll workers, to participate in the election. But we at Mass Vote are doing all that we can to recruit as many poll workers as possible this fall. We are in discussions with colleges and universities from around the state to encourage students to serve as poll workers. We are also in discussion with fellow advocacy organizations, as well as businesses eager to do their civic duty, since the state has drastically reduced the limitations to hiring poll workers. Finding individuals to serve as poll workers has been made far easier. We talked about the language piece. I won't go over that again, but we do know these challenges: adjusting to the new vote by mail system, recruiting enough poll workers, and ensuring that our elections take place in the most equitable manner possible are the greatest challenges our elections face this fall. There are undoubtedly many other challenges we didn't address here, and countless challenges that will arise in the weeks and months ahead. Yet these are challenges that we advocates and city officials must address whenever and however necessary. Literally, hundreds of thousands of people are depending on us. We cannot let them down. We cannot let our democracy fall. We can't let our democracy down, and too much is at stake this fall for us to get it wrong. So I thank you so much to Commissioner Tavares and your team, the amazing work that you're doing, to the city councilors for lifting up this issue and giving it attention, the attention that we need, the attention we hope the Secretary of State will give it as he launches his public education campaign, which can't start fast enough. So again, thank you. Thank you for allowing me to testify today and to bring some of these issues to the forefront.
Hand raised by Jaya Iyer. If you'd like to speak.
Madam Chair, she might need you to let her in as a participant.
Yep, I think I just did. Jaya?
Hi, thank you, Councillor Edwards. I have a question, I guess, for all of you as well as for the commissioner. In terms of student engagement with voting, I realize that a number of students will be resuming classes in Boston and at our local institutions. I'm also a community organizer at Fenway CDC, so I'm particularly thinking about the Fenway. However, those students who may be registered in Boston won't necessarily be physically in the city and may not have received their absentee application. So I realize that this may be a complicated question and may not have an immediate answer. I may not get an immediate answer on it, but what can be done, or what are you all doing in order to engage universities to ensure that they're encouraging students to either request an absentee ballot wherever they are, or register in their home state or home city or town?
I could, if the commissioner, yes.
There's usually someone within the university that is urging the students to register to vote and fill out a voter registration, not a voter registration, I'm sorry, an absentee ballot application in their home state. And we've actually worked to create a do's and don'ts for students, or kind of taboo questions that come up around students, whether they're going to lose their financial aid if they register to vote here in the city of Boston versus being registered in their home state. So we do have all that material. Most of our work tends to be with Suffolk, Northeastern, and sometimes BU. So we have not really done too much work to broaden our efforts with other universities. I think with the student poll worker program that we are working with the colleges and universities, my goal is to see how that goes in terms of communication between the university and the election department, and to see if that's something that's going to be manageable and that we can actually assign to one particular person to have that role to reach out to additional schools, so that we're not burdening our staff with all of this additional layer of work, because we do have our work cut out for us with the upcoming elections and the vote by mail piece.
Thank you. We also received some written testimony, specifically from Tom Reddy, asking about a lot of the specifics of the cleaning that we covered a good chunk of it, but I just wanted to go through some of that written testimony for things we didn't cover, specifically around ventilation and fans, and how we're making sure that the air doesn't get too stuffy in certain, whether doors and windows will be open and fans installed. The actual voting booths, will they be 6 feet apart from each other? And we covered the pens, we covered hand sanitizer, and the floor markings at 6 feet, we covered that as well. So yeah, those 2 things right now, and I'll keep looking through his suggestions.
So in terms of ventilation, that's a little bit difficult because we use a variety of different locations. We use BPS schools, we use BHA properties, libraries, community centers, as well as private locations. So that's a little difficult. We are instructing our poll workers to disinfect surfaces. In addition to that, we are assembling cleaning crews. So BPS has agreed to have their custodians do the cleaning. The library will have their custodians do the cleaning for their facility. And we will assemble additional team for any private locations. They will go in there and disinfect periodically, maybe every 2 to 3 hours, more thoroughly the high touch areas such as door handles and things of that nature. And the voting booths will be spread out, 6 feet apart, especially where we can give voters the 6 feet. That may mean that we have fewer voting booths, which means that you can only have fewer people processed at a time. So
we really hope people vote by mail, is what we're saying.
People take advantage of vote by mail, especially for November. In smaller locations, if we have to cut it down to just 2 voting booths, that's 4 people, but that may not mean that you can let 4 people in, depending on how many poll workers we already have inside of the polling location.
Thank you. There's a lot of other specific bullet points. A lot of it centered on the fact that 10 polling locations have almost 5,000 voters each, and a lot of that, what we addressed about the amount of people coming through and the long lines and making sure that they're separated. But I will forward, I believe actually Christine will forward this letter to you specifically with these questions, and we'll make sure, Mr. Reddy, that the questions are answered, or that you hear directly from either myself or from the Elections Commission. Thank you for your testimony, your written testimonies, Mr. Reddy. In terms of any other public participations or conversation or comments, I don't see any other people, and you could just raise your hand and I will know. Go here. You're not part of the public, Councillor Flynn. I was coming back to you. Okay, so going once, going twice, 3 times for any other public testimony. Again, you can send it in by email to ccc.go@boston.gov. I will turn it for concluding remarks, or did you have a question, Councillor Flynn?
Yes, Councillor Edwards, thank you for giving me one more opportunity. I appreciate it. The question I had is a lot of the, and maybe I missed it, and if I did, I apologize, but a lot of the voting locations are in public schools. What are some of the, what is the outreach we're doing with the schools at this time? And what are the safety issues? What are the public safety issues? What are the health issues? And again, if I missed that, I apologize.
No apologies necessary. We did note that I believe there is no school on September 1st. And then we are going to have to follow up with BPS because there's an understanding from the Election Commission that November 3rd, there is no school. And,
Okay.
and that is not in the BPS's calendar. So that is something we are trying to figure out for you, Councillor.
Thank you, Councillor Edwards.
Welcome. So with that, I'm going to turn it over to my colleagues for final remarks. If Councillor O'Malley, would you like to kick it off or end it?
I'll kick it off. Thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you to all of our colleagues for great, thoughtful questions. Commish, thank you again for your great leadership, and Sabino and your team and the members of the public. I feel very bullish on a number of things. The high percentage, the fact that we're at 42,000 requests for voting by mail already. Commish, can you furnish us with sort of updates every week, just what the raw number is, members of the council between now and August 26th?
Absolutely.
That'd be great. Thank you. I feel good about helping spread. I feel good that you feel better about staffing on election day and on early voting, but please call on us to help get the word out. I believe we covered the last time the stipend has increased for poll workers for this election. Is that correct?
That's correct. All of the positions were increased by $25.
Great.
Not much, but it's something.
Yeah, no, but that's great. That's helpful. And then a lot of the safety protocols, I think, are right on the money. The one thing that I would urge you, and this is maybe something we can be helpful with as a council, and I don't even know if action would be taken, but I understand I think it is vital that we mandate mask wearing on election day. I'm in City Hall, you're in City Hall. We have to wear a mask to come into City Hall, as we should. We're seeing, obviously today, Boston was listed among some other cities that are seeing some dangerous trends. To have that number of individuals congregating, although there will be safety protocols on election day, but to have that many people in and out, particularly as many of these locations don't have the best ventilation system, to have one individual not wearing a mask could put others at risk. Now, your point, which is a good one, about there could be a health issue that an individual would have that would prevent him or her from wearing a mask. While I'm sensitive to that, I think that there are many, many, many accommodations that can be made to that, including early vote or voting by mail. So that would be my only sort of takeaway. If there's any way that we can, the most important thing that we're doing now is getting access to voting by mail, which you and your team have done a very excellent job on, and we'll continue to push that. But just for those that will vote on election day, anything we can do to make it even more safer. Sounds like you're doing a lot of really important things, but that mask requirement is just something that I'm going to continue to push for, because I think it's absolutely needed on election day. So look forward to working with you, working with the mayor, working with others to get that hopefully done. And yeah, I thank you all for your work. I know this was longer than we wanted to do, and you've been very generous with your time, Commissioner. Keep up the good work and call on us if we can be helpful to you in the weeks ahead. Thank you. And then maybe, Madam Chair, I don't think there's any need necessarily to do another working session before the 1st, but maybe we could do one after the primary, just to sort of, gear up for November, which is obviously the bigger election, the more important one. So thank you all. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Councillor Flynn?
Thank you, Councillor Edwards, and thank you, Councillor O'Malley, for a very productive working session. I want to say thank you to the election commissioner for being here and for her leadership. And I think her team has an excellent plan. So I want to acknowledge the work of the election department and the professionals in that department. I want to say thank you to Mass Vote as well for their outstanding work on this important issue. My question or my follow-up would be relating to Councilor O'Malley's point. We're not having another working session until after the election, but could we, Commissioner, maybe have an after-action report on what went well or what challenges we may have had from September 1st election, and using that document or using those lessons learned, using them for the November election? That might be helpful to us with a much larger turnout, as Councilor O'Malley stated. But again, just want to say thank you to you and your team as well, Commissioner.
Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Bach, any concluding remarks?
Thank you so much, Madam Chair. Just to thank the election commissioner and say certainly in terms of takeaways, we'll definitely reach out from my office about sort of places we could use some extra outreach to try to reach our unhoused folks. And then I think definitely as soon as you can get us that flyer about early vote locations, great. And obviously as soon as you have the final polling locations for the first finalized, I just think we want to use all channels to push out that information. And my last note will just be, I mean, certainly, you know, the phone line issue that I raised, and then also I think if we're not doing expanded ballot boxes for the really thinking of November, because looking at the way that we de-densified the
Councillor
spots
Bach,
in
connection
polling
is really
location
becoming.
sense given the guidance.
Councillor Bach,
It just really brings home to me. Oh, sorry. Okay,
quite all right.
never mind. That's all.
No, Councillor Bach, I can't. We can't understand. I can't. The connection's really bad.
Go ahead. Thank you, Madam
Okay.
Chair. Sorry about that.
Okay, Councillor Breadon.
Thank you so much, Commissioner and Sabino and all concerned, and thank you. This has been a very well worthwhile and useful working session this afternoon. One concern, and again, I'll throw this into the mix. I don't expect an answer right now, but one concern is about the post office, and I feel that further up in our federal government, there's someone who is trying to undermine the effectiveness of the post office and also throwing doubt on its ability to deliver mail-in ballots securely, etc. One concern I have is just in terms of ensuring that your mail-in ballot gets to City Hall before on September 1st. Is there a recommended time for filling out your ballot and getting it back to City Hall if you're mailing it in?
All of our requests have to be in by August 26th, and that was done to ensure that we have time to mail the ballot to every registered voter and that they could in fact return it to us. Voters can still return their ballots up until Election Day. However, that ballot has to reach the election department. As Cheryl previously mentioned, ballots cannot be returned to the precinct. It has to be in the hands of the election department by September 1st. So if someone feels that they were, just kind of waited until the last minute, they can still hand deliver that ballot here to the election department.
So there's no recommendation in terms of like you have to post it a week ahead of time to make sure it gets back by mail. If carrying it somewhere is not an option.
I would always say the earlier the better. I don't know. Sometimes the mail gets somewhere the next day. It takes 3 days. So the sooner they turn their ballot around, the better chance they have of it getting to us on time.
Okay. Thank you so much. And thanks again for your work. For me, voting is the most important and precious gift that we have as citizens. And I really congratulate you for all your work that you're doing to ensure that as many people as possible can vote this year. Thank you.
Thank you. And one more thing is the site for tracking the ballot is trackmyballotma.com. So if any voter wants to track their ballot, whether we receive their application, whether their ballot's been mailed or received on our end, they want to go to trackmyballotma.com.
Thank you so much. That's very useful.
Councillor Asabi George.
I don't have any questions. Thank you. And thank you, Commissioner, for being with us all this time, as well as I think Cheryl's still with us. Thanks.
Councillor Mejia. She may have had to go. I apologize. I think she sent me a text. Councillor Flaherty may have gone. So I will just note some follow-ups. And one, I do want to say, yes, I absolutely think we should have a working session, not only about, to learn how this works and to learn how we can make sure, we're lucky to have dry run, if you will, with the primary, but the mass, there will be even more people who show up in November, and we'll be able to, I think, even build on what we learned from this one. I want to say, yes, we also do plan on figuring out what's happening on November 3rd for schools, and just to, again, announce that. I'm happy to work with as many people as possible to get as many folks applying applications in their hands to make sure that they apply to get a ballot. I wanted to note, and I might actually disagree, or maybe I'm concerned about the messaging about requiring a mask to vote, or excuse me, a mask to enter into vote, because it immediately hits to me, are we requiring masks in order to vote? And that's I think we should be emphasizing the safest way to vote is with a mask or unmasked in your house, but we don't want people to walk away with a message that you can't vote unless you have a mask. I think that for me, that might be running afoul of some constitutional issues and any other tests that we put in front of people to vote. And the only reason why that's important is because if it's not enforced equally, then you can have all sorts of people claiming all sorts of isms, like only there did they stop those folks from voting without a mask, and over here, and so on and so forth. So I'm a little concerned about that message that way, but I think safety around voting might be another message we can work on. You don't want to wear a mask, vote early or vote by mail. So those are the things that I'm a little concerned about with requiring a mask to come in. I think we should be able to require the safest ability, and maybe the city lawyers or someone else can come up with a requirement that doesn't run afoul of the access or enfranchisement of people's rights. But that's my only concern. And then finally, just again, I'm gonna repeat the website. It's trackmyballot.com. You can track your application, where it's at. Am I correct?
Don't.
Nope.
MA, it's trackmyballotma.com.
.com, and you can track your application.
Yes.
And you can track when you submit your ballot as well, if it's been received.
It's been received, correct.
Wow. Okay, that's great to know. So thank you all. I think unless the lead sponsor has any other objection, we're going to go ahead and call this done. So thank you very much. Have a good day.
Thank you. Thank you.
Bye, everybody.
Thank you, everybody.
Did I leave yet?